For analysis, retired four-star Marine Corps General John Allen, now former commander of the NATO International Security Assistance Force and president of the Brookings Institution. General, thanks so much. Is it wrong to observe now that it all feels scripted? The Russians control parts of Ukraine for years. Putin declares them independent. Then the Kremlin says his puppets there send word to Moscow that they need military help against Ukrainian forces. I mean, that's where we are.
This is the playbook, Shepard. This is the playbook that the Russians have been following for years. And while often people are concentrating on the numbers of tanks and the troops and the aircraft and ships at sea, the truth is that the Russians have been waging this 21st century conflict against the Western democracies, certainly Ukraine, but the Western democracies now for years. And it comes in the form of manipulating the domains of the 21st century conflict, and in particular, the cyber domain and the information domain. And the lies that they tell in the information space with disinformation and misinformation, and the attacks that they undertake in the cyberspace in Ukraine, but of course in our democracies as well, are intended to, if you will, soften up the West in pre-conflict operations in those two domains to set the conditions for a favorable outcome for physical operations occurring on the ground, in the air, and at sea. This is the playbook that we've been seeing now for years. No one should be surprised at this.
General, based on your decades of service and experience, given what the Russians have positioned and where they've positioned it, and what we've heard directly from Vladimir Putin in the last day, describe for us your view of what we're about to see here.
Well, as I said, they have set the information space and are prepared to continue to set the cyberspace to support physical operations if necessary. Now, we have seen the, if you will, a puppet legislature in Russia declare that the provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk are recognizing those two provinces as being sovereign states. Now, not all of those provinces are in the hands of the Russian-backed separatists who've been waging war in that region called the Donbass for years. And so if, in fact, as the leaders of those separatist movements, which have requested support from the Russians, if, in fact, the Russian troops begin to fight on behalf of those separatist leaders, ultimately to overrun the entirety of those two areas, that is obviously very clear indications that a full-blown invasion is occurring.
Yeah,
we're hearing that troops are actually moving into those areas now. And we are also hearing that the Wagner Group, which is the Russian mercenary organization that is in multiple places around the world, Africa in particular, Wagner Group elements have come back from Libya and come back from Syria to be made available for infiltration operations into those regions as well.
And there are field hospitals, General, not down in the south in these, or I mean in the east in these separatist areas, but to the north and to the west in an area that's not all that far from Kyiv. You know, senior officials are suggesting to us that they believe this isn't some nibbling around the edges, but a full-on takeover of this country and occupation of the capital. Is that what you're seeing?
It could well be. The positions, the troops, the equipment, the support echelons, the medical support echelons, they're in place.
Well, then we're on the doorstep. We're on the border of NATO countries. And what we're one mistake away from a conflict that we could get drawn into, or am I misreading that?
Well, I don't think that we're one step away from being drawn into the conflict. I think that we've been very clear that both U.S., European, and NATO leadership has made it very clear that we'll defend every square inch of NATO territory. Ukraine is not part of NATO. And the United States and European allies and NATO as an alliance has been very clear that we'll defend NATO and we'll provide support to the Ukrainians. And we have been providing a lot of support to the Ukrainians in terms of anti-tank and anti-aircraft assets. And I suspect that will continue even in the event that the Russians attack. We've been very clear. The Americans, the Europeans, and the alliance has been very clear that we'll defend NATO territory and we'll support the Ukrainians in the legal defense of their country. We've got to remember here, the Ukrainians are no provocation and they're no threat to Russia. This is entirely a Russian-contrived, Putin-contrived crisis. And he's using this as an opportunity to try to unsettle the security architecture of Europe, unsettle the NATO alliance, unsettle the United States, perhaps even separate the United States from from Europe by virtue of this threat. And all he has done, in fact, I've just returned from the Munich Security Conference, is to create a level of stability and solidarity that we have seen with our allies, we haven't seen with our allies in a long time. And they welcome the American leadership that we're seeing displayed right now.
General Allen, for your time tonight and your decades of service, thank you.